Welcome to the Drivable Podcast. I'm Ali Akbarian, and over there is Brad Williams. And today we're talking about the process of regaining your license following a C5 injury with Trent. Trent has been through an extreme process to gain independence in driving again. So we're talking to him about driving a van from his wheelchair, high-level controls, and much, much more. So I'm really excited to, get into this and unpack it all with Trent, talk about the lessons and the OTs and all of that stuff and everything that we need to know. So Brad, are you ready for another awesome episode?
Yeah, this one's going to be great. I love these high-end control ones because we can learn so much. So yeah, let's get it underway.
Yeah, there's so much to them. So yeah, let's do it.
Welcome to the Drive Able podcast, where each episode you get to listen to two of Australia's leading professionals in the area of driving and community mobility for people with disabilities. In each episode, they interview drivers, carers, and industry experts and share the insider's guide to driving with a disability. Here are your hosts, Brad and Ali.
Hi everyone, I'm really excited to get into today's interview, but before we get started, we just want to do a quick shout out to our sponsors who make this show possible, Mobility Engineering and Williams OT. This show takes time and money to put together, and we're forever grateful for their passion for our industry. Okay, enough with the business, let's get into the interview. Today, we have Trent. Trent, thanks very much for joining us. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks for having me.
We always start with the same question with everybody. We want you to introduce yourself and let us know a little bit about your disability.
Yep, so my name's Trent. I live in South Australia, down in the southeast of the state, down towards Mount Gambier, which is around 3 hours from Adelaide. I grew up here, always lived in the country, liked the lifestyle, and then around about 10 years ago, I had a acquired disability, a spinal cord injury. So that was a sporting injury, which my injury level was at around C5. I got a little bit of C6 movement, but I think I'm classed as a C5, complete quadriplegic. So still down living in the country. Use predominantly a electric wheelchair to get around, although I do also have a manual chair. Living in my own house and doing all right still. So yeah.
Did you want to talk to us about the actual, sporting incident? Is that something that we can unpack? What happened to you?
Yeah, that's fine. So I got my injury, like I said, around 10 years ago. It was actually on my birthday, on my 21st birthday. Yeah. I was playing Australian rules football just for my local team. And it was just an unfortunate tackle that, went a little bit sideways and ended up landing on my head. Virtually straight away, I knew there was something wrong. Couldn't feel anything, like virtually my whole body. Obviously couldn't move anything. That involved waiting around for the ambulance to come, and then a long process to get taken from the ground and then up to Adelaide, where I spent 12 months. All up around 12 months in hospital and then in rehab before I could come home. So that was a bit of a journey to get back here. But so it was a sporting injury. But I think, even though it was obviously bad, but in a way I was lucky to have the community support and the support of the whole football community, and everyone was always really good to me. So yeah, I was lucky there.
When you play football or Aussie rules football, is this something that is a known consequence?
No, there was. There is the odd injury. It's the same as anything. As people get injured, driving cars, jumping into pools.
Yeah.
It's just an unfortunate incident that happened. I think there probably is a few injuries a year maybe, but it's pretty rare.
Yeah. Okay. So it wasn't like, but the reason why I was saying that was more along the lines of, do people kind of like know what to do in that code if something like this happens? Like, were you cared for immediately because people were like, oh, okay, this is this kind of injury sort of thing?
Yeah. So our local trainer, I think he was like a ambulance volunteer too. So
Yeah.
I think they did the initial assessment, so they kind of knew there was something, pretty serious, out of the ordinary. So yeah, then once we just waited around for the ambulance, and they did everything.
And when you say you're living in the regional area, are you living like on a farm, on a property, or like just in a community?
Yeah, in a small town,
Yeah.
in a community. Yeah, so not out on a farm. The town's around 2,000 people, so it's fairly small.
And were you driving at that time?
Yeah, so I was 21. I had my full license, working as a tradesman. So yeah, driving around was obviously a big part of getting from A to B in the country. There's no public transport, really. So yeah.
And what trade were you doing?
I was an electrician. Yeah.
Okay.
So let's go to immediately after the accident. You said you had 12 months in rehab. What was that like, for a bit of insight? And then what kind of things did you face when you first got home?
So initially when I went to Adelaide, it was about 2.5 weeks in ICU. Had to be intubated, and then so I spent a few weeks in there, and then eventually made my way out to what's called Hampstead Rehab, which was just the spinal cord rehab facility. That was after about a month and a half, probably. And then, yeah, it was rehab. And then the last 2 months, I was more on waiting for my home renovations. At the time of my injury, I was living just in a share house with some friends. But after my injury, my parents got their house modified with we had a bathroom built onto the house, ramp, things like that, just to make it accessible for me. So the last part of rehab was more around getting my house ready. So I couldn't leave home straight away.
Trent, was that NDIS era?
No, this was before NDIS. So I can't actually remember the
Disability SA at that point?
Yeah, it was like some part of it was through Disability SA, but others was also, we just funded it ourselves because what they wanted to do wasn't really going to work. It was just better for us to do.
So your parents were providing, I guess, the support at that time? They were rallying around you and so on?
Yeah, not personal care support, but yeah, everything else. When I left hospital, I had carers and stuff like that. They could help me out straight away.
Yeah.
But yeah, in terms of support, like I said, I was lucky to have the community and not just the local community, but also the wider football community, and also family and friends.
So, because this is a driving podcast, what was it like when you first got home from a mobility point of view in regards to getting out and about and so forth? Was that taken into account as part of your discharge, or when did that come into the frame?
Yeah, like I said, in the country, there's no really public transport. So, and where my parents actually lived was out of the main town. So it was 15 minutes away from Kingston. So I had to. When I first left hospital, we got an older adaptive vehicle that we just got from a friend, or someone who knew someone. But before I left before I left rehab, we had purchased a accessible vehicle from Melbourne that I could take my wheelchair straight into. So I just went in the back of that, and then we could, move around in that. But yeah, that was definitely a big consideration of going home.
Well, that's really good that you were doing that sort of in the hospital and considering the transport side of things. With the accessible vehicle from Melbourne, what was that? Was it like a van where you got in the back and was driven around, or did you get straight into driving?
No, it was a Kia Carnival, where the back of the car comes up, and then I'll just go in a ramp and then sit in the middle back seat virtually.
And how was that, like, I guess, mentally and just because you were driving before that, right?
Yeah, I was driving before that, yeah.
Yeah, so how did you sort of cop sitting in the back all of a sudden and in the wheelchair and in that kind of booty area?
Yeah, I don't know. I never really thought about that.
Yeah, okay.
To be honest, it was probably, not the worst thing to come out of everything. Having this in the back seat, but yeah, it was good to have the vehicle and be able to get out and about, because it's just something that you need.
Yeah. Well, that sounds good.
And so when did you start to think about then getting back into drive? What frustrations were you having, first of all? What frustrations were you having with mobility at that point of time, getting out and about in the community? Was it relying on people, or what kind of things were you struggling with at that point?
Yeah, so a bit further down the track, I moved into my own house in away from my parents. So I was just living by myself. And I have carers that come in and help with personal care and things like that. But especially when the weather's bad or it's really hot or raining and stuff like that, and you might want to go see some of your friends or go somewhere, you can't just jump in the car and go. You have to either organise a carer to drive your car or ring one of your mates and ask them to come pick you up, which is, it's not always the best thing. You prefer to be able to do things independently. So that was definitely a frustration. And just be able to get around, independently by yourself when you want. It was something that, it was probably the next thing that I was really looking forward to trying to do. So that was probably about 4 years ago or 5 years ago that I really started to wanted to pursue that goal of being able to drive independently.
So what was the process that you went through then? So how did you get the ball rolling?
Yeah, it was actually, I've been talking about it with people, and then one of the driving OTs was coming down locally, and I just sent them a message. And I think the most important thing is just to really just start somewhere, because it's such a big process and it can be a bit overwhelming in how to do it. But just touching base with someone that knows the system and knows where to start, that was the most important thing. And then from there we just did little assessments, and we just started working out what I might need and how to go about it, who I need to talk to, and then that just got the ball rolling, and then it just progressed from there until we got to the end goal eventually.
So when you first did get started, was that NDIS era?
Yes, that would have been about 2018, I think. Yeah.
Well,
so I was in the NDIS then.
Yeah. Okay. So 2018, I don't reckon there was an option for a vehicle coming to Adelaide or South Australia at that point of time. So I reckon we've done an interview with Total Ability before, and had a chat with Paul, and he's got a van that comes around Australia nowadays, but I don't think that was available in 2018. What process did you have to go through? Did you have local assessments, or did you have to travel?
So I had a local assessment first. Like I said, there was someone coming through down our town, so I had a local assessment And then I think I did meet up with the Total Ability van in Adelaide. So I went to Adelaide, did a bit of an assessment. I actually had a drive up there because I got a temporary license just to see kind of what I needed. And then, we formulated a bit of a plan. I think we might have even put in an application to the NDIS. Can't quite remember now. With what controls I need. And then I also started exploring different options for hand controls from different companies to see what I liked.
Did you go? Sorry, did you say you had, I'll go on.
You go, Ali. Go, mate, you go.
I was going to say, did you go, did you say you went somewhere else to trial as well? Or
Yeah, so I think it was
the van came to you.
Yeah, the van came to Adelaide, and then I also went. So then by this stage, I really wanted to drive. So then I went to Sydney to visit PME, which is a company that does hand controls and
like the high-end hand controls.
Yeah, high-end hand controls.
Yeah, I think we had Nick Tiago had that from PME, went there.
Yeah, that's true. Yep.
Yeah, so I'd seen some of their stuff online and liked how it looked and how it controlled. So I went to PME and had a chat with the engineers and what they can do. And then I started going down. I wanted their stuff because it was. I felt like it suited me best. So yeah.
They've been doing it for years, haven't they? So, they know what they're talking about. When you go and have a chat to them, they seem to have a solution for everything. They know what they're doing there at PME. So you went, so you had to travel to Sydney and tested it out at their place. Is that what you did? Is that the process you went
I went to Sydney and then, had a look at the hand controls. I think we organised like a occupational therapist from Melbourne. I think he contracts to PME. So he was going back up there. So then I went back to Sydney another time and actually drove a car with the hand controls. So they have a van set up with the hand controls in there. So then I had a bit of a drive in a temporary setup. It wasn't specifically to my needs, but the van was set up so I could drive it, and then just to see how I could control the vehicle, what I might need, what sort of hand adaptions for grips and things like that, to actually make sure that I could drive. And then once the occupational therapist was happy that, yep, you can drive, you're going to be able to control a vehicle safely, then I could do my formal application to the NDIS, because they needed proof from an occupational therapist, I think, that I could safely control a vehicle before I could actually apply for the funding.
How long had you been going at this stage? How long has it taken to get to that point, do you reckon? Just a rough guess.
Yeah, it would have been 12 months at least, and probably 2 trips to Sydney maybe.
So, and then from that point, once the application went in for funding, was it an easy tick of approval? We know that we've done this interview a few times with people. You can go back and listen to a few of the other podcasts. It's not always easy to get the tick of approval from the NDIS. Did you have to go through a few hoops and
so it probably would have been 12 months, I reckon, waiting for the approval from the actual NDIS. It was a long process, and there was a few tweaks that we had to do to the application. I was sending letters to my MP, just hassling everyone that I could get hold of to try and put in a good word for me, which might have helped. I don't know. I got there in the end, but yeah, so that was it was a long process, and this was probably in 2018 or over not 2018 and 19. Yeah, it took a long time, and then you lodge your application, you don't really know if you've done it, like if they're going to say yes, and then it's just a really long waiting period. I had a few, because I'm in the country, there's no public transport or anything like that, so for work options and things like that, but we were pretty confident that we were going to get it eventually, because there's not really any other options for transport for independence for myself. But yeah, it's a long process.
It's the 2 years is actually pretty consistent. So I don't think the MP letters helped you by the sounds of things, because basically everybody that I've spoken to on this podcast, or we've spoken to on this podcast, that's gone for a high end thing takes 2 years.
Yeah.
So it sounds like that's it seems like that seems to be the process. By the time you have to fly and go here and there and make appointments and all that, it just takes time. So
yeah, it does take time, and it takes a bit longer too, because I'm in the country. Like, if I had appointments in Adelaide, or if I was in Sydney, it'd be a lot easier. You can just easily go to PME whenever you need it, instead of having to. It's like, it takes a lot of time.
So then you just briefly mentioned employment. That was something I was interested in talking to you about. So you said that when you first came back from hospital, there wasn't any NDIS, so you didn't have as much sort of support as, let's say, you might have now. And so did you need to sort of, get up and start earning some money, and like, what did you need to do around that, and how did you approach that? Because you were a tradie, and I'm guessing that kind of couldn't go ahead any further. So, or could it? Like, what happened there?
Yeah, so, well, how I was working before, obviously I couldn't do it. I was an electrician, so that was off the table. And before NDIS, there's definitely out-of-pocket expenses, like I said, for how, like, we paid for the conversion of my first vehicle. I'm not sure if they would pay for that now. So we paid for that. We also paid for a bathroom onto my house, which was a lot of, like I said, a lot of that was through community fundraising too. Like, without that, I don't know what I would have done. It would have been hard. And so, since the NDIS come in, it's definitely taken a lot of those out-of-pocket expenses away, even just for like consumables that I need for my everyday life. Like, I get a lot more funding for that now, which is good. So with employment-wise, I started working for the business where I was working previously in their office, just doing invoicing and quoting and things like that. Which I still currently do now. So they've been really good to me and keeping me on the books and giving me work. Like, within the first, it's probably a couple of years, I started doing that. Yeah.
The thing I was thinking was, do you miss doing electrical work, and do you think you could be an electrician in a wheelchair?
Probably not, no. But I used to like doing it, yeah. And other plans I had in the future, it was all more involved in manual type work, as a lot of things are in the country. Which I was planning on started to work in the family business, which was in the fishing industry. So obviously couldn't really do that. So yeah, I had to rearrange a few things.
I was going to say, actually, when you mentioned Kingston, I recently, over January, I drove across the country from Sydney to Perth, and we stopped in at Kingston. It's a beautiful area and lots of seafood. So
yeah.
So yeah.
Yep.
So you guys.
Yeah, my family's in the fishing industry, so that was my plan. But obviously, that didn't quite work out. But that's right.
Yeah.
Home to the big lobster.
Yeah,
that's
it.
right.
Larry the Lobster or something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah,
Larry
Larry the
Lobster.
Yeah,
Larry
that's
the
it.
Lobster.
With a very funky looking
So,
face.
so
World famous.
when did you know, or when did it feel like you could drive? When was that turning point where you went, I've got this and I know that I'm going to be able to drive and really get going?
Yeah, it was probably that when I first went to Sydney and I test drove some of their controls. I felt pretty comfortable and picked that up pretty quick. And I was driving around some hilly areas. There was some traffic around. So I felt, like after that, I felt pretty comfortable that I'm going to be able to do this independently. And then also because they're a pretty big business with a lot of conversions going on. I could see some of the other stuff that they'd done and how it would work for me, because I'd done a lot of research into it beforehand, trying to find people with my injury that had driven. And back then there wasn't really that much stuff. Like even now it's changed a lot in Australia. So it was hard to see other people with a injury similar to mine that were driving from a wheelchair, because I can't transfer. Yeah.
Not blowing our own trumpet, but that's exactly why we're doing this podcast. And we really thank you for coming on and sharing your story, because that's exactly why we're here, is to share those stories so people can learn from other people and go, yeah, maybe I can do that as well. So we really thank you for coming on. Right. So you had to buy your own car? You had to buy your own van because the NDIS don't purchase that bit for you?
Yeah. Yep. So once I had approval and NDIS were going to tick off on the conversions, and I purchased a Volkswagen multivan.
Yep.
And then that is the car that's generally the car that I think they do.
Is it like one of those drop floor self-drive conversions that you go up the back or the side?
I go in the side, drive
okay.
from my wheelchair,
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
With the driving, just quickly before we go on to the next part, with the driving, when you first sort of gave it a go, did you, because you had driven before, did you find it like the skill of driving, if that makes sense? Like, I know how to brake and I know how to accelerate. Was that part easy, or did you finally have to kind of relearn the whole thing?
You still got your road sense, because it would have been 7 or 8 years since I'd driven. So you kind of have to relearn it, especially the braking and accelerating or a lot, and the steering. It's obviously very different using hand controls. And it's still something that I'm still getting used to, like working on being smooth on the brake and accelerator. But it's still a skill that I was lucky that I picked it up fairly quick. Where some people find it a little bit harder, I believe. But it's a skill that you got to work on. But it wasn't too bad straight away. I felt pretty comfortable.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, for disclosure, I know Trent and I've seen him drive, and so people can get a picture of what's going on. What we'll do is we'll put a link to a video that I've done to show all of the process that Trent goes through in regards to driving, the controls and so forth that he uses. But I want to do an extra shout out here to PME. I mentioned earlier that they've been doing this for years. They've done so much to your car that I think a lot of people would just go, oh, I forgot about that. Little things like little twisters and turners and things to be able to help you do your air conditioning, do your windows, do your sun visor, do all these other extra bits and pieces that able-bodied drivers take for granted, being able to reach and grab and so forth. With the C5 injury, Trent, your hand functions affected as well. So do you want to talk through just a couple of those little things that they've done for us?
Yeah, like you said, there's so many just little things that are taken for granted that that they've done. Yeah, so with my car, because like I said, in the country, driving longer roads, cruise control, I can use cruise control with, I've got a little button next to my elbow. So when I'm steering without moving my hands, because that's how you steer with a little joystick with your hands, I can just tap a button with my elbow to put the cruise control on. Then there's another button that's connected to a electric sun visor. So if the sun's in my eyes, I can just press and hold that and the sun visor goes down. And then, you know, in my headrest, I've got indicators to be able to turn them on. And then even just all their workmanship is really good, I found. Yeah, like you said, they've engineered little control knobs so I can, when I'm not moving, I can reach forward and just move my my air conditioner to turn it up or down, which I probably would have struggled to do without the adaptions. What else have they done? Just even everything custom, like, because when I was there, I went there and then we worked out where I can have buttons to put the ramp up and down just to make it like perfectly for me and not just a generic thing that they say, yeah, you'll learn how to do this. It's like, where do you need this button so that we can make it easier for you? Because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. There's no point in having something that's 96% or 95% suited to you, but then that last 5% makes you not independent.
Yeah.
So I was really big on that, which everything from getting like a chest. When I drive, I put a chest strap around myself in my wheelchair just to secure my torso in place because I don't have any upper body control. You obviously have a seatbelt, but then also just a chest strap, like little things like being able to, come up with a way to put a chest strap on independently or, things like that.
Yeah, no, it's amazing, and check out the show notes. We'll put a link in to go and watch you drive, and all those buttons and dials and things that you can activate, even things like buttons on your wheelchair to make the ramp go up and down easily.
Yeah.
All of those things are in the video. So please go to the show notes, click the link to a YouTube video, and it'll take you there, and it's well worth the watch. Mate, you just mentioned a little bit earlier on when we started talking about this area that it was about 7 years from the accident to you started driving. Now you're in South Australia. South Australia have this thing that if you've been suspended for more than 5 years on your license, you have to start again. Is that what happened to you?
Yeah, because my license was medically suspended, I had to get my learners and then do driving tests, pass the VORT test, which I had to wait. It's a bit of a funny one because you can't pass your test before, like I couldn't pass my driving test before I got my car. So I had to go to PME and then they do the driving with the OT from Melbourne who contracts with them, Tom. And he virtually said, yes, you will be able to drive. So, he has to say he will be able to get his license, but you need to give him his car before he can get his license, which the NDIS doesn't like doing, which is fair enough and makes sense. So once I got my car here, after the massive process to get it converted, then I could pass my learner's test, and then because I'd had my full license previously, I didn't have to do the 75 hours or whatever it is.
Yeah, that's what it is in South Australia. Yep.
Yeah. So I was lucky in that way that I could go straight back onto my full license.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah,
that sounds really good. So, I mean, it's something that you've got to be aware of, I guess, if you are looking for, getting back on the road. In different states, they obviously have different requirements of cutting people off and so on and so forth. So
yeah, you have to, your local OT, if they know what they're doing, they should be able to help guide you through that area for sure. But if not, there are the local governments that can, authorities that can help you out. Mate, when you actually got your license and you were independent driving, what was that like? What was that first drive like? What were those first moments when you were out on your own again and could go where you wanted?
Yeah, it was definitely a good feeling.
Where did you go? What was the first drive you did by yourself?
Can't actually remember where I went now. Probably just drive around town, or maybe out to my parents' house at Cape Kappa, which is, that's 25 k's away. Or just, even just to friends' house, even though they're not very far away, but it's just still out of reach in a wheelchair. So just being able to go, might only be 3 k's or 2 k's, whatever it is, just when it's raining or when the weather's bad, or just being able to get out and about when you want. It's it's definitely a good feeling, or being able to go pick someone up and take them somewhere instead of always having to ask someone to do something. It's great.
Yeah, that sounds pretty good.
That's what makes all the difference. And, I can talk from my point of view. That's why, I do what I do, that independence that you're talking about, that ability to do what you want. I know Kingston, weather can change rapidly there on the coast. It can be sunshiny 1 minute and then rainy the next.
And extremely windy as well.
And extremely windy.
Plenty of wind.
That's it must have been a great feeling. And what, are you the designated driver now? Are you being asked by everyone to drive, or?
Yeah, I've got a few trips that I've got to drive people around, about 10 years worth, but that's all right. Slowly start ticking them off.
Sounds good. So what advice would you give for anyone else wanting to sort of give this a go, or struggling with any of this, or thinking about, driving, or sitting there worried about it?
Yeah, I think you just got to, you got to start somewhere. You got to just get the ball rolling. Because it's such a big process, it can probably be a bit overwhelming on what to do and how to do it. But you got to start, get in contact with an OT that knows the process, and just start somewhere and then start testing different things and doing a bit of research online, seeing what people with similar disabilities or are using to drive. So that would be my advice.
Yeah, that's good.
So if you wanted to know, if the first time you're tuning into this podcast or you haven't listened to before, I got grilled by Ali in episode number 41. So he grilled me on what an OT does. So if you want to go back to listen to my take on the OT side of things and what's involved, then go back and listen to 41. There's also an interview with was it Jamin? Is that who it was? Ali, who's Jamin, in a similar type of scenario in Western Australia. Who's in a very similar car and similar controls. You can go and search for that podcast as well, and listen to his story if you're wanting a little bit more evidence or understanding of how the process works, because it was slightly different working in living in WA.
Yeah.
All right, that's it. Time's flying. Time has flown like it always does. But before we ask our final question to Trent, we just want to do another little shout out to our sponsors that make the show possible, Mobility Engineering and Williams OT. We've learned a lot in this podcast over the years that cars are way more than just getting from A to B. What's a specific memory that you've got? I mean, you haven't had your license for long, but is there a trip that you've done in your car, or is there something that you've done in your van that's that nobody else knows about that's really meaningful to you, Trent?
No one really knows about. I don't know. I think it was just
doesn't matter.
What's that? Sorry.
Or maybe they know about it. That's unique.
I think it was just being able to, go and just when I first got the car, just being able to go to your friend's house, pick them up, just picked everyone up, went for a drive around, didn't really go anywhere specific, but just, being able to do that instead of, having to call people to come pick you up and stuff like that. It's definitely good. And I think it's just those little things that are the best.
Blow them away with all the gadgets.
Yeah, that's it. Everyone's always pretty impressed.
Mate, a huge thank you to you. It's been a great interview. I really appreciate that you coming on and sharing it. Like we mentioned halfway through, it is about understanding what other people do and other people in a similar situation. We hear that a lot. So that's exactly why we do this podcast, is to share people's stories so other people can learn from what you've said. So, personally, from my side, I really thank you for coming on.
Thank you very much.
I know you've taken time out of your day. It was great to have you on. What we will do is we will put a link to that video on YouTube where you show all your gadgets in the show notes. So make sure you go and check that out, listeners. We'll put that in every show note, whether you're listening on Apple Music or whether you're listening on Spotify or you're watching this on YouTube. To start off with, make sure you go and press that link. Trent, is there a way that if people really wanted to learn a little bit more, that they could get in touch with you, or we can share it? They can get in contact with us and we can share it, or have you got an Instagram page or something like that where they can go and check you out?
Yeah, maybe I'll put my email and Instagram page or something in the show notes too. And because I can't actually remember what it is off the top of my head, my Instagram. But we'll track them down there. And just send me a message, or I'm happy to chat.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
That's
great. That's great. No, we really thank you again. And guys, what we do in every podcast is Ali and I go away from this, and we're going to come back in a moment and do our top 3 takeaways from what we've learned from an interview, because we're always learning something as well. So again, Trent, thanks very much for the interview, and everyone else, stick around while Ali and I do our top 3 takeaways in just a moment. Trent, cheers.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for having me. See you guys.
Cheers. Thanks very much. See ya.
All right.
Okay, welcome back. In this section, we bring our expert analysis and top 3 takeaways from the interviews that's for this episode. This is where Brad and I provide our more than 30 years of joint experience in the industry, helping people with disabilities to drive and get out in the community in a safe and meaningful way. So we have the 3 takeaways. Brad, what's the first one?
Right, the first takeaway that we want to highlight is to start somewhere. Trent said that. Trent just said, you just got to start somewhere. Just reach out and ask somebody and do some research and just get the ball rolling. That was a great insight. We can be paralysis by analysis sometimes, but just starting can just get the ball rolling, and it seemed to come together for him.
Yeah, like you said, it's an overwhelming process, and we've had that common feedback by so many people that it is an overwhelming process. So you just got to get into it and just one thing at a time and just start somewhere. And he mentioned that twice quite distinctly in that interview. So I thought that was a really strong message there.
And it kind of leads us into our second takeaway, which is about the time. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So one thing I noted when we were going through this interview, and I guess there was a common theme that's come up, is when you're doing a standard driving control or a standard thing, you're looking at minimum 6. Well, I mean, that's a really, really good outcome, 6 months, but you're looking at like a 12-month period for a standard driving control or a standard kind of access thing to get. And when we say 12 months, that's from start to finish, to when you start the process to when you get the funding and getting it over the line. And for the
when we say
stuff,
standard, we're talking about like the car behind Ali's head. If you're watching this on YouTube, a standard car.
Yeah.
So we're not modifying the car. We're putting in additional things to the car, but the car's not being cut. It's not being reshaped. it might be a little bit, but the whole structure of the car's not being ripped apart and put back together. So that's what we mean by standard.
Yeah.
But then we can talk about high end. That's a bit of jargon that you hear around this industry a lot. We go standard to high end. So what do you mean by high end, Ellie?
So the high end vehicles, which the Nick Tiago and Jamin ones also we spoke to about, they are the ones where the entire vehicle is cut. The floor is cut, it's dropped. All of the steering controls are changed to really high-end, sophisticated controls, all robotic stuff. It's all, lots of robotics, lots of electronics. And yeah, like it's basically like I think they call it space drive or spaceship and things like that. Like it's really futuristic type of thing. And that's a really involved process. And it's interesting because Trent was saying, it took a long time and it was 24 months. But every other person we've spoken to takes 24 months. So to me, that's not a long time. That's the time that it takes. So rather than, and I guess when I'm saying that, if someone is sitting there having a big cry over 2 years about the NDIS not wanting to support me and it's taking so long and I'm being screwed over by the NDIS, well, you're not. That's the process. It takes 2 years. And it's not, I guess, it's maybe not ideal for some people's timelines and families, but it is the process. And and the best thing you can do is go back to that first lesson and just start somewhere so you can get that 2 year
ball rolling.
Yeah, get the ball rolling and get that 2 years over and done with, but that is what it is what it is. It's a process that you got trials, you got, you're cutting the vehicle up. It's a whole big ball game, so. Yeah.
But it leads into our third dot point, Ellie, and really, is it worth it? And he spoke about his position in community. Do you want to talk about? You spoke about being an individual. To me, just as we're getting ready for this, do you want to unpack what you mean by community?
Yeah. So it was really interesting. Again, something I was listening to recently. Some personal development stuff, and just some positive stuff. I was talking about how. We're all individuals, but we're also individuals within a community, and one doesn't work without the other. And what Trent was saying there was he wanted his independence, and having that independence and not asking people for help all the time and being a burden was really important to him. And I think that's important to everybody. It's individuality and independence is important to all of us. And again, what he said, which was something I wrote down, which a lot of people, I think almost everybody says to us, is that first drive. That first drive is like one of the best feelings they ever have, because it's like that first bit of independence I got, I got to, and what do they do? They all do the same thing, just go driving around the block or something very simple. And it's the most amazing drive of their life because they're doing it on their own and they didn't have to ask someone, But the thing that he did mention multiple times throughout this thing was how that community was important for him to get that independence and express his independence. So he needed the footy community, he needed the parental community. That community got around him to support his independence to be able to flourish. So we are independent, but we do have to have that community around us.
Sounds like a game of cricket. Everyone's in there as an individual, but you have to be a part of a team to be able to get the results that you want. And you can see that, everyone says that they want to be independent. They want to have the freedom. But that's the freedom to choose what you can do in your own community and not be restricted to someone else's ideals of what a community is or ideals of what you should be doing here, then, or anywhere else. But yeah, it makes a massive difference to somebody's life when they're able to get it. And like he said, it's about learning from others. And he said it. I want to highlight it again. We're very thankful for Trent coming on, and that's what this podcast is about. So make sure you go and check out a few more episodes if you want to learn from others. We get people to share their story so you can learn from them to get you out and about on the road. But it's also for OTs, mobility experts who are putting in the modifications into cars as well. It's there for all of us to learn from. I mean, Ali, you and I learn from every single episode, and that's what we do it for. So make sure that you go and listen. On that note, we want to do a shout out to our sponsors again. So Mobility Engineering and Williams OT to help you bring this to you. Williams OT, is a driver assessment and rehab service, and we do all the pieces of the puzzle to assist people with disabilities to reach their driving and community mobility goals. And Mobility Engineering is a team of passionate and dedicated people focusing on bringing Australia's largest range of suitable transport solutions for all walks of life. And if you know somebody or would like to be a sponsor of this show, make sure that you reach out and leave us a comment, or reach out to us via our email, driveablepodcast@gmail.com, and hit us up on Facebook page or search the Drive Able Podcast, and we'll give you more information about how you could sponsor the show. As we say in every episode, the advice that in this podcast is general in nature. So if you've got any queries about what can work for you, make sure you get in contact with your local OT or mobility dealer and set yourself up with those trials, just like Trent did, got started somewhere and set himself up with those trials, because trials really do put you in that driver's seat. Ali.
Thanks very much, Brad. We'll see you
Thanks,
next
mate.
time.
Another great interview. So, see you in the next one.
See ya.
Thanks for listening to the Drive Able podcast with Brad Williams and Ali Akbarian. If you like what you've heard, make sure you like, rate, and subscribe. It really does make a massive difference. If you or anyone you know would like to share a story about driving with a disability, or you would like to get in contact, find the show notes, or find the resources mentioned in this episode, you can find us on Facebook. Just search @Drive Able Podcast for more information.